In a sudden coup, Niger soldiers have claimed to overthrow President Mohamed Bazoum's government. And this was announced by a group of soldiers who appeared on Niger's national television hours after the president was taken hostage inside the presidential palace. Currently, Niger's borders are closed, curfew has been declared, and all state institutions have been suspended. President Bazoum said that the National Army shall be ordered to move in if the rebels do not come to their senses. Bazoum supporters protested outside the National Assembly and called for the president's release. Currently, Niger's borders are closed. Russian Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu met the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to mark the 70th anniversary of the Korean War armistice. In a tour of the arms exhibition, Kim Jong-un showcased some of North Korea's banned ballistic missiles and briefed Shoigu on national plans to expand the country's military capabilities. Shoigu handed him a letter from Russian President Vladimir Putin. During their meeting, Moscow and Pyongyang pledged to boost strategic and traditional ties. Both nations also reached a consensus on matters of mutual concern in the fields of national defense and regional security. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has left New Zealand and is now bound for Australia. Earlier in the day, he met with New Zealand Foreign Minister and also the Prime Minister in Wellington after an official welcome ceremony. The visit comes as Australia and New Zealand expressed concerns about a new policing agreement between China and the Solomon Islands. The Chinese agreement could potentially undermine the Pacific's agreed regional security norms. US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin also arrived in Australia after a visit to Papua New Guinea. Earlier, Austin met Papua New Guinea Prime Minister James Marape to strengthen military, diplomatic and defence ties in the Pacific as the United States competes with China for influence in the region. Austin and the United States Secretary of State are now in Brisbane for annual bilateral talks with their Australian counterparts. Australian Prime Minister also said that he would meet the two senior US officials on Friday. French President Emmanuel Macron denounced new imperialism in the Pacific during a landmark visit to the region. He warned of a threat to the sovereignty of smaller states. In the island state of Vanuatu, Macron said, and I'm quoting here, "There is in the Indo-Pacific and particularly in Oceania new imperialism appearing and a power logic that is threatening the sovereignty of several states, the smallest often the most fragile." Fresh instances of arson were reported from violence-hit Indian state of Manipur. On Wednesday, a mob set at least 30 homes and shops ablaze in Manipur's Moreh district. This included a Forest Department guest house. The arson took place in the Bazaar area, which is close to the Myanmar border. Officials say a gun battle took place following the arson. Security forces intervened and dispersed the mob before the situation could worsen. Now, this comes a day after two buses used by security forces were set on fire by a mob. 9 people, including a minor, were arrested in connection with the incident of torching the buses. Taiwan's military conducted anti-amphibious landing drills on a beach near Taipei. The drill simulated a Chinese attack on the island. The exercise is part of Taiwan's week-long massive war games as Beijing ramps up military and political pressures on the island. In Brazil, a riot broke out in Amaro Branco prison, leaving at least 3 injured. According to a government report, the riot began when inmates in an isolation pavilion took 2 police officers hostage. Visitations to the prison are suspended as families wait for responses from authorities. Now in Pakistan, a sex and drug scandal has rocked the Islamia University of Bahawalpur. As per police, university staffers and faculty members were purchasing narcotics and distributing the banned substances with the help of students. The staffers and faculty members were also exploiting and blackmailing female students, and police have flagged sex parties. Pakistani National Assembly Standing Committee on Education is probing the matter, but the university is reportedly crying foul. Russia is hosting various African leaders for a Russian-Africa summit in St. Petersburg. Vladimir Putin is scheduled to have a working lunch with the African leaders and discuss the situation in Ukraine. The Kremlin said that 49 African countries have confirmed their participation. At the summit, Putin is expected to make a big statement that will address the issue of food, fertilizers, and energy resources. The summit follows the first grouping that was held in 2019 in southern Russia, Sochi. Thousands of teachers took to the streets of Chile demanding that their salaries be paid. Dozens of schools suspended classes for a day after the protests began. The teachers are demanding a liability payment derived from a reform approved under the military government. Teachers also demand to have a better work environment and equal economic bonuses for all teachers. College teachers, and they have announced that if the government does not respond in a week, they shall also go on protest. Unrest escalates again in Peru after protests continue to rage on. Dozens of demonstrators clashed with riot police outside the Peruvian Congress in Lima. The protests come after an alliance of left-wing and right-wing parties was elected to lead the Congress in next legislature. Peruvian police fired tear gas and charged a group of protesters to disperse the crowds.
Dina renuncia escrito a electores en lugar.
Palestinian youths burned tires during a rally against Israel's storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Young men were spotted chanting that Israel's provocations and marches shall not go unnoticed. The first man to visit every country without flying has made it back home to Denmark. Thorbjørn Pedersen started his journey in 2013 aboard a Maersk container ship and visited 203 countries in a decade. He visited Maldives, which was the last country on his list. Despite a 2-year break due to the COVID-19 pandemic, he continued his journey after lockdown restrictions lifted globally. He is also commonly referred to as Thor by the Danish. That's because he travelled by train, bus, boat and even on foot to complete his voyage. Typhoon Doksuri has killed at least 6 people in the Philippines and is lashing towards Taiwan. Taiwan shut several businesses and schools. Airlines cancelled hundreds of flights amid warnings of landslides and floods. Doksuri was a super typhoon earlier but lost some of its strength after hitting Philippines coast. Portuguese firefighters scrambled to put out flames sweeping across a natural park. Strong winds are complicating efforts to tackle the blaze. A video posted on social media showed large plumes of dark smoke covering the sky in the region. More than 600 firefighters were brought in after the fire erupted. Waterbombing planes and helicopters also battled the blaze. Exciting developments in India's space program. Indian government is planning to privatize part of its small satellite launch vehicle and has drawn interest from 20 companies. The SSLV, known for its low-cost approach to launching satellites, has already seen success with its first satellite launch earlier this year. Now, this bid marks India's first major privatization effort in the space sector, and the selected bidder will get the chance to take over manufacturing and development of the SSLV rocket program, aiming to make India a global hub for small satellite launches. India's private lenders are facing a tough challenge as attrition rates rise amid surging demand for loans and competition in the market. Now, this demand is putting immense pressure on frontline staffers, leading to a worrying increase in employee turnover. HDFC Bank, Axis Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank and Yes Bank have all reported significant attrition rates, causing concerns about mis-selling and service disruptions. The world's biggest memory chip maker, Samsung Electronics, announced that the worst is over for the global memory chip market. However, they announced plans to extend production cuts because a demand recovery is largely constrained to high-end chips used in artificial intelligence. The semiconductor downturn caused the company to incur a record operating loss of $7 billion from its chip business in the first half of this year. Although the loss is expected to decrease in the current quarter, the industry is likely to continue with production cuts.